Welcome to Thinking Green. I am Rana, and I'm joined tonight by Justin Paglino, who has been on the show before. He wears a lot of hats, and he's going to talk about 2 or maybe 3 of them tonight. But we're going to start. Some of you who live in New London know that I've been circulating petitions to get the Green Party on the ballot for federal office, for the presidency, and for U.S. Senate. And Justin is our candidate this year for U.S. Senate. Indeed. So we'll start with that, and then we'll go into some of the other things you're up to. So I think we first met in early 2020, and you ran for Congress. And you did petition and got on the ballot, but do you want to talk a little bit about what motivated you to get into politics in that way at that time?
Well, that's a great question. I guess I'd always been interested in politics and passionate about it, but I had more time because I was became retired from medical science in 2018. And my initial plan was not to go into politics, really. But I was going to be more active, but I wasn't planning to run for anything at first. I was planning to do more musical work as a piano teacher. And I also ended up getting jobs in pit bands. My son was in a couple of musicals around that time with a private theater company, and they needed pit bands. And I played piano, so I had a few friends, and we formed a 4-piece pit band for 13 the musical, and then Legally Blonde, and I had to learn all the music, and that took up a lot of my time in my early retirement days. But I quickly gravitated towards politics because I never stopped, from the time I was a teenager, reading the news, following the issues, and voting and supporting certain politicians. But, it was around that time that I was, in the course of my life, I'm turning 51 this year, so for over 30 years, for about 30 years, I was a Democrat. I was a progressive Democrat. I felt like this was the right thing for me. I knew I wasn't a Republican, that was for sure. I felt like I thought the Democrats were the good guys. To me, Republicans represented corporate power or power of the wealthy, the elite, and I wanted to be on the side of the little guy, the average person, the person struggling, the person who needs help, the person who's being treated unfairly by people who are taking advantage of their power. And so I thought this is the right party for me. And I donated a lot of money. I spent time worked for some of these candidates. I was, but it was around this time, over the course of that time, that I started to become more and more disillusioned and frustrated with the Democratic Party. And all along, I kept fighting as a progressive Democrat to try and elect more progressive Democrats within that party because I felt the ones who usually end up winning the primaries weren't necessarily the kind of Democrats I would like. I want more progressive Democrats, more aggressive with healthcare, more aggressive with the environment, more aggressive with helping the poor and the middle class. And it never seemed to really happen. We seemed getting these corporate Democrats that were, they sometimes talk a good game, but end up, if you look at what they do, really, not supporting the policies. I want really more corporate-friendly policies in my eyes. And, this is what happened. Bill Clinton, the first president I voted for, called himself a new Democrat. And this was, to me, the beginning of the end of the Democratic Party being a party of the poor and the working class. And he was very explicit that this is not the regular Democratic Party. We're going to do things differently now. And he sure delivered on that. He ended welfare as we knew it and was proud of it. He passed NAFTA against the howls and the screams of the labor movement at the time was outraged. And, but he was almost a point of pride with him that he was willing to, stand up to labor or, stand up to the people who want to defend welfare. No, this is the way we're going to do it. We're going to do things a little bit more to the right now in the Democratic Party. And it got them a lot more donors, and it got them, and sometimes it works to get them elected, sometimes not. But over the course of that time, I just felt less and less like this was the party I belonged in. And so, around that time, I was learning more and more about how they actively fight the more progressive candidates in their own primaries. They don't stay out of it. The leadership, when you give money to the DNC or the DCCC or the DSCC, they take that money and they're using it to put their foot on the scales of primary races. And it's always for the more donor-friendly candidate, the more corporate-friendly candidate, because they have a business model now to protect. And so I used to give to those organizations. I really regret that now. So, it was around this time I was thinking, I always liked the Green Party. I'm going to see what they're up to and find a local meeting. And there was one. And I met Owen Charles and Lynn Charles and several of the other Shoreline Greens. And, I liked these people. It was good. But, I was ready to do something radical because I just increasingly believe that this two-party system is no good. It's not working. And why should I keep on supporting candidates that I don't really feel represent me just to stop the candidates that I like less? That kind of makes sense if you think of it as a zero-sum game with only two parties and all you care about is stopping the other ones. But how low are you willing to lower your standards just to defeat the Republicans? That becomes the key question. How low will you lower your own standards and who you will support, right? And I was tired of lowering my standards. And it was around this time that I learned about ranked choice voting, 2019 or so, which I had never heard of, because, despite it having been around for over a century and been used in Australia for over a century and used in Ireland for over a century.
My high school used it, actually,
Oh, yeah.
for class officers. The hair system, we used to joke about it, but many, many years later, I thought, wow, this high school was really ahead of its time.
Yeah, and they use it, I don't know how long in the Academy Awards to select the Oscar winners. And, the major parties, at least the Democrats, I think, even use it for their own nominating conventions and so on. It's just a better voting system. I mean, I've for those of you who've seen me on the show before, you may have heard me use my favorite quote from John Adams, which was, a division of the Republic into two parties would be the greatest political evil under our Constitution. And here we are, everyone with the two least popular presidential candidates in our history, really. I mean, approval ratings really low. They have their base of support, but it's not big. Neither one is very popular. And popularity of the two-party system is in the toilet as well. I mean, the overwhelming majority of people say, I don't like the two-party system. I want a multi-party system. That makes sense. A multi-party system would be much better. And then when I learned that ranked choice voting makes that possible, I said, oh, well, then it's time. It's time to make the jump. It took me a little bit of a process of going through, changing who I am. It's a little bit of a thing.
Yeah, I went through that actually. I was a Democrat for 30 years, and it was after the 2000 election where the Democrats, rather than fight what happened in Florida in that election, the disenfranchisement of tens of thousands of black voters, the butterfly ballots, just the fundamental issue that the Secretary of State who oversees election was a paid employee of one of the candidates. And instead of confronting those things that were real threats to our democracy, decided to scapegoat Ralph Nader. And I hadn't voted for Ralph Nader. I actually liked Gore better than I had liked Clinton. But that was sort of the beginning of the end for me. And then in 2004, there were a bunch of Democratic primaries that I voted in. And the candidate I voted for in all three lost. And I thought, I'm not going to be able to make change in this party, so I might as well do something outside of it. But of course, I kind of remember when you were getting involved with the Green Party, the one other thing that was going on was COVID happened just around that time.
Yeah.
And, your background kind of made you a natural to speak about it. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, but maybe.
Yeah, I have an MD, and after the MD, I did 2 years in lab medicine, which is clinical pathology, which is laboratory tests, but it includes microbiology. And that was my favorite, subsection of pathology was microbiology, which includes, parasites and bacteria, but also viruses. And viruses were my favorite microbe pathogen. Just in terms of what I found the most interesting, not that I'm rooting for them. But viruses are just fascinating. Are they alive? They're not really alive. They're not cells. They're just like these little robots with DNA or RNA in them. All they care about doing is making more copies of themselves. That's all they care about. They don't have a brain with which to care about anything. It's just like they're these machines built to replicate themselves, and they'll just do whatever they have to do that. They have like the Democrats, they have a successful business model. It's been working for them. Viruses are very successful, and they will, but they have, don't care what stands in their way. They'll cause a lot of destruction. So deep down, I really hate viruses because I care about people, and I hate the damage that virus does to people. So I was interested in maybe being an infectious disease doctor. I saw, it's funny, speaking of pandemics, together with my career and stuff, it was the movie Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman.
Oh, yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
That movie came out right about the time that I was kind of in med school and thinking about what kind of medicine I would maybe want to go into. And it was very influential, actually, on me, because I was kind of up in the air. I didn't know. And I thought, wow, viruses really are a threat to our health and our safety. I know it was a movie, but it's a plausible, all of it is a plausible scenario. Viruses have no, ceiling on how damaging they're willing to be. They don't care. So, if they become airborne, they can become as deadly as they want to. They wouldn't care. If they wiped us all out, some of them would go away, the ones that can only survive in humans. But they wouldn't know what they were doing, so they would just do it anyway. And the ones that live in animals would go on. So anyway, when COVID hit, to get back
right.
When COVID hit, I'm a little loopy because I'm getting over a viral infection myself. But when COVID hit, I said, "Oh my God, this is a serious situation," and it was, and we saw, over 1 million deaths by the time it had started to die down, and just unbelievably tragic. And the question becomes, what could we have done better? But it also is, what do we need to do to prepare for the next pandemic? Because there will always be another pandemic. Always, always, always. The viruses never stop, evolving and mutating, and you never know what's going to be coming next. So we have to be prepared. And one of the things I keep coming back to when I reflect on the COVID pandemic and how it could have gone better is if everyone had had access to a doctor that they could consult with to make decisions and get guidance, and if they could go to a doctor who had time to see them and give them that guidance and help them think through their decisions. Do I want to get vaccinated? Do I need to isolate? What should I do with my kids? What about my parents who are living alone? Like, when is it safe for me to visit them? All these questions that came up for everybody, that the best person to ask, a difficult question about viruses and virus pathology and communicable diseases and what you should do about them, the best person to ask is a doctor. And where most people were trying to get answers to these questions was not from their physician, because either they couldn't afford one, or they don't have insurance, or they can't afford the out-of-pocket cost to see one, or because we don't have enough doctors to serve the population, and the ones we do have are too stretched for time to spend that kind of time trying to give everyone guidance. And so instead, people are looking for answers anywhere they can get them, on the internet, or talking to people, or trying to get some guidance from the government. But not everyone trusts the government, and the people who are giving advice from the CDC or whatnot, they can't give you very personalized advice. They don't know you. So to me, one of the big take-home lessons is that I think we would have made it better together, through the pandemic, better together, if each of us as individuals had access to expert advice that we could call on, and someone we trust, someone we know, someone we can have a dialogue with and ask questions back and forth. Oh, I don't understand. Why should I do that? And you can ask the questions you want answered directly to the person, and they can get back to you. Or maybe your doctor is like, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I'll look into it. But to me, that was one of the main things that was really missing.
So, that points to our whole healthcare system, and it's, been a tremendous challenge in the U.S. to get the kind of universal care that most countries of the world have. I was, while acknowledging that all of that is true, that the pandemic was much worse because people didn't have access to trusted healthcare professionals, there were a couple of things that happened during the pandemic that I thought might point us in a hopeful direction. It hasn't turned out that way, but unlike most medications, once there was a vaccine, people could get it for free, even from the beginning. If you suspected you had COVID, or if you were going to be traveling, you could get a COVID test and with no out-of-pocket costs, so you didn't have to think, as some people do for their insulin or other needed medications, do I have to skip lunch to be able to afford to have this care? The care for COVID that was available, even though it was kind of limited, people could access it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, maybe people will get a taste of what a universal system might look like, that if you thought you were sick and contagious, you could get a test and it wouldn't cost you anything out of pocket because, your public nonprofit insurer was going to pay for it and not argue with your physician or the lab whether or not you really need it. And it didn't happen, although I'm hoping that people still remember that part of the experience of the first 3 years, I think, of COVID. Now, if you want tests, you have to buy them.
Yeah, they kind of like phased that out, right? Like at first they were free and you could get them shipped. All you have to do is call a number. And then I remember, it started to like slide back. And it's like, okay, now the tests are $15 or $20, We're going backwards, back to the way we were.
So I'm sure one of your issues, right this year, Senator Chris Murphy is running for re-election, and unlike Senator Blumenthal, he is not an advocate of a single-payer healthcare system.
No, he is not.
So that I think we don't really have another candidate in this year's race who supports having a single payer system. And I don't think that, recently, no, I don't know if it's recently or soon, it might have been today that the state-based Universal Health Care Act was introduced. Senator Markey from Massachusetts was the originator, and they spent the last few weeks looking for co-sponsors. I don't know if either of our Connecticut senators co-sponsored it, but that actually removes barriers for states that want to create a statewide system that they can use federal money, Medicare money, Medicaid money to fund a state-based universal system. And if Congress can't do something for the whole country all at once, Canada started out incrementally. It started out in one province, and then eventually all the provinces had to do it because who would want to live in like the 2 provinces in Canada without health care?
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
It started, I think it was in Saskatchewan was the first one to adopt a province-based universal health care.
Yeah. I mean, there have been movements towards it in Vermont and certainly in California. And, I worry about, with doing it state by state, I support if a state thinks they can do it and they get that federal bill passed to make it possible.
Right.
And then great, and that, because yes, they can lead by example. I worry that about economies of scale, that it might be harder to pull off on a state by state basis. But it could work.
Connecticut, in spite of being the insurance capital of the world, actually has the distinction that we are one of the very few states that has a nonprofit Medicaid program. When Governor Malloy took office in 2012, maybe, we had a long string of like 20 years of non-democratic governors, and he wanted to make a splash, and some disabilities and healthcare advocates in the state convinced him to kick all the private gatekeepers out of Medicaid.
Yeah, which is single payer on a state level.
Yeah, and I've talked to healthcare providers here who say, Medicaid is the easiest insurer. Husky is the easiest insurer for us to deal with as healthcare providers.
Yeah, insurers love. I've heard the same thing, that people generally are very happy with Husky, and patients too, and also with Medicare, which is our other single payer national health program, but they're not. I know a lot of providers who are not so happy with Medicare Advantage.
I bet.
Which is and patients who are not so happy. A lot of people who call it Medicare Disadvantage, because that's the partially privatized version of Medicare. again, letting the profit motive back into health insurance where it just doesn't belong.
Yeah, and it's less efficient because the reimbursement rates actually are higher for the Advantage plans than for Medicare. So it actually costs taxpayers more while making them vulnerable to some denials of service.
Yeah. So, just to back up a little bit, Medicare for All is something that, Bernie Sanders was very successful at really popularizing more than it had already been. He talked about it all the time, and Americans ate it up. I mean, he had huge support.
Yeah.
There's obviously a lot of support. There is desperate feeling that people are not getting the health care they need in the richest country on the earth. People are going without medicines because they can't afford them. They're skipping medical visits because they can't afford them. They're going into medical bankruptcy, $500,000 a year. It's just a travesty. I mean, it's just a shame that we spend $1 trillion on our Pentagon budget. And the funny thing is, of course, single payer, it's not like it would cost us more money. It's not like we have to worry about affording it. Let me repeat that. Medicare for All is not something that is more expensive, that you have to worry about, it's unaffordable. It is less expensive. It's less expensive. And the studies have been done over and over and over that prove that this is the case. Look up the study, 22 studies agree Medicare for All is less expensive. It's a summary of all these different studies. And why is it less expensive? Well, why is Medicare so efficient? It's because they're not paying all these people.
Right. And they can negotiate drug prices, and there aren't any shareholders who are getting rich off of it.
Right. They're not there to make money for shareholders. They're not, they're not padding their executive salaries and lining the walls of their office building with gold plating or whatever they do to feel important. But it's they found a way to get in there and make money where they don't belong, where the profit motive doesn't belong, because the profit motive, if you're trying to make money as a health insurer, you can either do it by charging more for people's health care or giving them less health care by denying claims. And we don't want either one of those things. We want a program run by we the people that is simply, the revenue wouldn't be from premiums, wouldn't be from out of pocket. It would be from tax revenue. But tax revenue, unlike, everyone having to pay the same amount, is not a flat tax. It's not regressive. It can be progressive. You can have the wealthier pay their fair share. They can pay more. Those who can afford to pay more towards this program pay more. I could go on and on about progressive taxation and why it's it's the only logical way to run a country. Because if you don't, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
Which is what we've seen.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we should move on a little to foreign policy. I know you were on the show back in November talking about, what was going on in Gaza, which has gotten much, much worse. And to the point, today was, the primary election for the Democrats and Republicans. And the Green Party is actually having a month of primary voting, presidential preference voting in April as well. But in the major parties, there has been a lot of publicity and a lot of people motivated to vote uncommitted in the primary because although there are 3 candidates on each ballot, I think, or 4 candidates, really it's down to Biden and Trump. And the uncommitted voters really don't like their own party candidates. And so, anyway, one of the issues is all this money that's going to Israel that is being used to purchase U.S. weapons. And I don't know, things have gotten much worse since you were on the show in November.
Can you believe that, it was November and we're talking about what an atrocity this is and the unjustifiability of the violence that was going on. And here we are, April, and it's been going on every day.
And
it's just I can't.
It's gotten worse. And, this is a point that I think a lot of people haven't really thought of, but, I lived in Israel for a while. And one of the problems now is that people are starving and dehydrated. And I'm thinking, living here in New England, it kind of rains year round. But if there's a water shortage anywhere in the West Bank, in Israel, in Gaza, between May and September, it doesn't rain. So there isn't even rainwater to be collected.
Mm-hmm.
So I really don't know what the next month is going to look like if dehydration has already been a big issue, over the last month or two.
October 9th, Israel cut off food, water, medicine, fuel, and it took a while, but at this point, people are, they've already been, for several weeks at least, been resorting to eating animal feed, grass, cooking grass or, plants that they find on the roadway. People are starving to death. Children are starving to death. It's, read the reports, listen to the UN. They keep saying they're on the brink of famine, but I think they're already, whatever you call it.
They're in the middle of famine.
They're in the middle of famine. It's already a disaster with people and children, starving to death already. And water, there's not clean water to drink. And Israel is restricting what can go in. And then yesterday, they bombed the World Central Kitchen. I mean, they attacked these guys. It appears to be very much have been a targeted attack because the World Central Kitchen folks had told the IDF where they're going to be. They were in what was considered a safe zone. And, I think it was like a drawn-out attack. It wasn't like a one-off bomb. I have to look into the details.
Yeah, I don't know the details, but
Yeah.
I think for those of us in the U.S., what really actually I find appalling is that without our help, this wouldn't be happening. We are really enabling it. We are culpable. And many, many people you talk to, as I try to gather signatures on petitions to get Green Party candidates on the ballot, you and Jill Stein and whoever the vice presidential candidate would be. And people say, oh, but, if Trump wins, we lose our democracy. And I'm thinking, if we're doing things like sending, sophisticated weapons to a country that, for one thing, is a nuclear power, and we're not supposed to be doing that, and has documented human rights violations going on, then do we really have a democracy already?
I don't have it in me morally to justify starving a child to death. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't have it in me. I'm not going to support the starvation of children. You can't you can't scare me, you can't threaten me with anything that's going to make me do that. It just is never, it's not posturing, it's not like political calculus or anything. I have a feeling of moral responsibility and integrity that will never allow me to pull the lever for someone like Joe Biden, who has done what he has done to these 2 million people. And collective punishment is a war crime. They say it's a war. Look, Israel's terrorizing this entire populace. And if terrorism is using violence and terror against innocent civilians in order to try and coerce their leadership into changing their policies or their decision, then that's what's happening. Israel is acting like a terrorist state. And they're starving children to death. I mean, I see the pictures coming out. I don't know how many ways I can express it. I don't see any moral ambiguity here, and I don't have it within me to even consider voting for the man who has been sending money, sending arms, vetoing UN ceasefire resolutions with his ambassador to the UN. They've been greenlighting this entire thing. Same thing with Chris Murphy. Same category. Another reason why I've got to. It's impossible to overstate the moral depravity required to be supporting what's happening. And why do they support it? I have my own theory of why we kind of give Israel a blank check on how they behave. And it was articulated by RFK Jr. RFK Jr. was explaining why Israel is such an important ally. And you might have thought he said something about our commitment to the Jewish people or something like that. No. What he said was, Israel is our aircraft carrier in the oil-rich Middle East. He went on and talked about all the oil and how like China may come in and get control of the oil, or Russia may come in and if we don't get control of the oil, then they will. Israel is so important because it's our beachhead, it's our aircraft carrier in the Middle East, which is a strategically important region because of oil. He just said the quiet part out loud. And so when you hear people say things like, Israel is such an important ally, if that's coming from a Washington insider, if that's coming from a politician, what they're really saying is it's part of our geopolitical strategy to have military power where the oil is. And if we don't have that client state there, then we risk losing control of the oil and the price of oil and the access to the oil. That's what it's about.
I think on a governmental level that is true. And if you go back like 3,000 years, that spot has always had strategic value and has usually been under control of whatever the empire of the day is because of its strategic location. I do think that there are quite a few Americans who, I was born just a few years after World War II ended, and the Holocaust was kind of a raw memory still when I was a young child. And the U.S. didn't really do much. They didn't accept Jewish refugees. My grandparents all came to the U.S. Between about 1900 and 1910, when immigration was pretty free. But in the 1930s and 40s, it was not. Mm-hmm. So I think that some people have this sense of guilt, and they feel like, we didn't come through for the Jewish people then, so we owe it to them now. But it's like such wrong thinking. Genocide is genocide, and when what's going on is described as a war, when you have a war, you're looking to topple a government and you're attacking their centers of power. Mm-hmm. But in this case, the weak, vulnerable people are being most attacked. Right after October 7th, what was the first place Israel attacked? A hospital, and newborn babies were left to die in incubators. And it was at that point that I thought, these are not the good guys. And at the same time, there was an overrunning of Temple Mount, where Al-Aqsa Mosque is, where Zionist Christians would like to see the third temple built so we can have the second coming. Mm. That was going on at the same time and didn't get much news coverage because bigger news was in Gaza. But there's a lot going on that's really disturbing to me in terms of the big political picture. And, we need candidates out there to talk about it, to have a little bit of podium, get some press coverage, because we're not really getting the whole story, and Americans are for the most part, those of us who are just reading mainstream media are not very well informed.
Yeah, and that's why I appreciate that you're doing things like this to put some other ideas out there into the media universe, because and that's part of the reason why we run Green, is because we want to get into, say, some of these debates, political debates. I'd love to be invited to a debate. Hey, Chris Murphy, I'd love to be invited to a debate this year. I debated Rosa DeLauro. I was very polite. I will be I will be polite, but I will call a genocide, and I will call your complicity. I'm talking to Chris Murphy now. No,
yeah. Well, Rosa DeLauro, on the plus side, has she and Joe Courtney apparently are supporting the idea of the U.S. restoring funding to UNRWA. So there's a little bit.
Are we not grateful?
Small
gains.
It is a little. It is. I mean, it's actually shocking that others aren't following suit.
Yeah.
But still, that's where the United States is right now. The discussion is like, are we going to restore aid to the one human rights organization that might be able to do something?
At this point, all the politicians that have been kind of quiet, going along with the program, not really making waves, letting Joe Biden lead this genocide and kind of going along for the ride, as this becomes more and more unpopular and the outrage grows and the images of the starving children and everything gets out, and the scale of the devastation and the scale of the cruelty becomes more and more clear, you'll see more and more politicians trying to reposition themselves and to show how caring they are and show how, this has gone on too long now. Now it's, look at the time. We have to really do something about this. They could have done something months and months and months ago, and they should have done something months and months ago. They should have spoken out from the beginning. It was clear from the very beginning that this was going to be an overreaction, a violent, like just unfathomable overreaction. And the question is, what should they have done? What should they have done? Well, it's kind of like what you should have done is what you should have done 60, 75 years ago. What you should have done, you're 75 years late in doing what you should have done, which is to create a binational state. This is what Albert Einstein said, was I would much rather see, who was a very smart German Jewish man.
Yeah.
I said, I would much rather see us living side by side in peace with our Arab brethren, recognizing that all humans are brethren, we're all one, we're all the same human race, living in peace than the formation of a Jewish state. He saw the formation of a Jewish state, which violates our principles of separation of church and state. He saw that as being a direct threat to peace. And what has happened?
Yeah.
If not that?
And peace groups in Israel now are calling for the same thing. The Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions has a slogan, BDS for BDS. Boycott, divest, sanction for a binational democratic state.
Yeah.
And so there is a movement in Israel to follow that path, but
Good. They're the ones who are right.
Yeah,
they're the ones we should support. Yeah, amplify those voices.
Yeah. So for me, I feel as though part of our, where I should stand is, I support the people who work for peace here. I should support the people who work for peace there.
Yeah. Speaking of people there, they've recently voted to ban TikTok, did they not?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh,
But, well,
I'm not sure where the bill actually.
oh,
I think it passed in the House.
yeah, I didn't know what the status was, but I know that it's been in the works.
Yeah, I think it passed the House. I'm not sure the recent status, but if it's been signed into law. But they're banning TikTok, of course, because they can't control the messages that go out on TikTok, and they know that the young people that they're afraid of who are on TikTok. If you're on TikTok, it's very easy to directly see footage from Gaza. You can see people.
Yeah, it's shocking and heartbreaking.
You can see them mourning over their dead children or their dead spouse or their dead parent. You can see the orphans like covered in blood, like just crying. It's horror after horror after horror on a daily basis of the most. It's just indescribable scale of horror that can't be compared to anything else because it's the worst of the worst. But you can see it with your own eyes. But what you can also do on TikTok, and I forgot how I got onto telling this story, but you can also, people in Gaza can get on TikTok and try to raise money to try and afford the food that the prices are like astronomical for food now in Gaza because there's so little of it left. And, like I said,
supply and demand.
People are dying of starvation. But if they can try and get some money, maybe they can afford some more food. So they're trying to do like fundraising online. And it's really cute. What they'll do is they'll have some like gifts lined up for the children, like on a table, like candy maybe or stuff. The kids are going to get the food whether you give money or not. But they do it as kind of like a incentive for you to give, like every time we get 100 coins, we'll give out some bags of candy. It's not like the kids aren't going to get it eventually, but it's like just, one of these kind of, it makes it kind of a fun fundraiser event. And you have one guy who's talking to the camera and is like, okay, can you get 50? They're talking in Arabic, so I can't understand them. But like, you can imagine they're saying, okay, can I get like one more gift? And on TikTok, you go on there, and for like $5, I can with Apple Pay, I can get $5 worth of coins. That's enough to buy like 100 or more coins. I give it click, give the gift, and you see the reaction in real time. You see the guy like, oh, thank you, and then all the kids get their candy and stuff, and they're doing like the hearts, like thank you. It feels so gratifying to be able to do something in real time for these people that I've been shedding tears over for many months now, on a semi-regular basis. Because every time when it really hits home, what else can you do when you really think about it? Anyway.
Well, we have 5 minutes left. So I wanted you to talk just for like 2 minutes maybe about your role as field director for the Jill Stein campaign.
I am. It's amazing, crazy that I've ended up now working on a presidential campaign, but it's been so gratifying and such a joy. Jill Stein is just such an amazing, wonderful person, so deeply ethical and principled and courageous and hardworking, and she would be hands down the best president we've ever had. I have no doubt. I'm not just saying that. I just really believe that. She came to our house. She for a little fundraiser, and she spoke. But I see her almost every day now as a member of the core campaign team. I'm the field director. I was initially the deputy field director, and then I got promoted. I must be doing something right, I hope. But an amazing team of people. I've never worked on a presidential campaign before, and it's very hard. And it's a Green Party campaign, so it's not like we're swimming in dollars. But we do what we can with what we have, with the staff we have. We wish we could hire more people and stuff, but we it's dedicated people who are working hard and trying to stretch themselves really thin and put a candidate on the ballot who's anti-genocide, pro-Medicare for all, and and takes the climate change thing seriously and doesn't just give it lip service. And because we have a climate that's collapsing as well, and that's another problem.
Yeah, that could be a whole other show. And I do want to show the petition. People who know me know that I and some other people have been carrying these around. Jill Stein is not an official candidate yet, but is anticipated to be endorsed at the presidential caucus that will happen, who knows, in July or early August. Justin's name is also on the petition for U.S. Senate. And signing these petitions, I want to say, does not obligate anyone to vote for these candidates, but it does represent a commitment to wanting more voices and choices in our politics, and especially when you have all the news outlets, owned by just a few different corporations. We don't get news from a lot of different points of view anymore, and this is one way that we can get divergent views out, pretty much the way we do on public access.
Yeah, and I want to, with the last minute or so, just try to address, you say you get some resistance. People say they want to stop Trump, and they don't want any more candidates on the ballot because they have to save democracy, and you can have too many candidates in a democracy. And
Yeah.
But the thing is that what I would say is, if electing Joe Biden, it's not just about stopping Trump. Look at Trumpism, because Trump isn't going to be the last Trump. There's going to be more Trumps. So what are we going to, if Joe Biden was going to eat away at Trumpism, it would have happened. If the 4 years of Joe Biden presidency didn't do anything to diminish support for this kind of leader, this kind of leadership, 4 more years of it isn't going to do anything either. The problem is not, something that you can just like, oh, we stopped Trump, like we're done, we saved because we got Joe Biden back. This is like a much deeper problem. It's the election of these I call them neoliberal, these corporate Democrats, starting with Clinton, then Obama, and now Biden, the party that has left the working class behind on purpose. Now they've lost the working class. So when you vote for these Democrats, you're voting against the working class, and they know it. The Democratic Party has really become the party of the professional and managerial class, the well-to-do or the well-educated, but it's not the party of the working class anymore. And so the working class is left without representation with this continued, a vote for Biden is a vote for Trumpism. If you keep voting for these lesser evils, we're going to keep going down the same path, and things are going to get, as they get left more and more behind, they're going to turn to more and more desperate measures of electing these people that they call, one person called him a bull in a china shop. I like Trump because he's a bull in a china shop. They just hate everything, and they just want someone radical.
Well, I think people are so stressed out that their higher level thinking is not really working very well. When you're in the middle of crisis, the fight or flight thing, higher order thinking is not what you're doing. And I feel as though our country is sort of in the middle of that. And with that, I guess I need to end the show because it ends for me. So I just wanted to let people know, if you are interested in, the State Green Party is going to have a Spring Earth Day celebration in Middletown on April 19th with 2 bands. One is Paddywhack, that was on our show last month and has had over 2,000 views on YouTube. And also Post-Traumatic Jazz Disorder, which is a band that you can see Justin playing the piano in,
Yes.
are going to be playing. We'll have food, we'll have silent auctions. We're going to be able to meet fellow Greens and have a good time in spring.
Yeah, including candidates.
So if you want more info about it, you can just get in touch with me. And next week is National Library Week, and our guest will be from New London Arts Council and the Cultural Coalition. And we'll see you then.
When the rain don't